Hi poetry lovers, welcome to my channel Bella Poetry Presents, where I share with you 53 segments about world-renowned poets and their beautiful poetry. Today we continue with our series Poetry at Random, and 2 segments ago I told you that I'm going to start talking again about the romantic poets of 19th century, 18th, 19th century. And we discussed the life and the poetry of almost a father of the romantic movement in poetry, whose name was William Wordsworth. Then we talked about John Keats, a wonderful English poet who died unfortunately too young at the age of 25. And today we'll be talking about another wonderful poet, William Blake. So, poet, painter, engraver, and visionary William Blake worked to bring about a change both in social order and in the minds of men. Though in his lifetime his work was largely neglected or dismissed, he is now considered one of the leading poets of English poetry. Blake was born on November 28, 1757. Unlike many well-known writers of his day, Blake was born into a family of moderate means. His father, James, was, I hope I pronounced it correctly, housier. He dealt with he had a business where he sold stockings and socks and so forth. And the family lived in London in a very respectable neighborhood. In all, 7 children were born to James and Catherine Blake, but only 5 survived infancy. By all accounts, Blake was a very nice child. He had a very peaceful, pleasant childhood, made even more pleasant by the fact that he skipped any formal schooling. As a young boy, he wandered the streets of London and could easily escape to the surrounding countryside. Even at an early age, however, his unique mental powers would prove disquieting. One time, he was startled to see a tree filled with angels, with bright angelic wings bespangling every bough like stars. Very beautiful vision. He told his parents his father was not happy that his son was seeing such interesting visions, and he almost got a spanking. Fortunately, his mother convinced his father not to do that. So his parents encouraged his artistic talents, and the young Blake was enrolled at the age of 10 in Parts Drawing School. Then the family decided that at the age of 14, William would become a master, would become an engraver, and would apprentice to a master engraver in their town. On August 4, 1772, Blake was apprenticed to the engraver, whose name was James Bassis of Great Queen Street, at the sum of £52 for a term of 7 years. At the end of the term, age 21, he became a professional engraver. Booksellers employed Blake to engrave illustrations for publications ranging from novels such as Don Quixote to serials such as Ladies' Magazine. On October 8, 1779, Blake became a student at the Royal Academy in Old Somerset House near the Strand. While the terms of his study required no payment, he was expected to supply his own materials throughout the 6-year period. Blake became a friend of John Flaxman, Thomas Stothard, and George Cumberland during his first year at the Royal Academy. All four men shared very radical views, with Stoddard and Cumberland joining the Society of Constitutional Information. One incident at this time affected Blake deeply. In June of 1780, riots broke out in London, incited by the anti-Catholic preaching of Lord George Gordon and by resistance to continue war against the American colonists. The riots, in response to a parliamentary bill revoking sanctions against Roman Catholicism, became known as the Gordon Riots, and provoked a flurry of legislation from the government of George III and the creation of the first police force. Houses, churches, and prisons were burned by the uncontrollable mobs bent on destruction. One evening, either by design or by accident, Blake found himself at the front of the mob that burned Newgate Prison. These images of violent destruction and unbridled revolution gave Blake powerful material for works such as Europe and America, published in 1794 and 1793, respectively. Not all Not all of the young man's interests were confined to arts and politics. After one ill-fated romance, Blake met a woman whose name was Catherine. After a year's courtship, the couple were married on August 18, 1782. The parish registry shows that Catherine, like many women of her class at that time, could not sign her name. Blake soon taught her how to read and to write, and under Blake's tutoring, she also became an accomplished draftsman, helping him in execution of his designs. Blake's marriage to Catherine was wonderful. They were very, very devoted to one another, and that continued until Blake's death. Blake taught Catherine to write. Collaboration with Catherine Boucher was instrumental in creation of many of his books. Boucher worked as a printmaker and colorist for his works. Around 1783, Blake's first collection of poems, Poetical Sketches, was printed. Only about 50 copies of Poetical Sketches are known to have been printed. Blake's financial enterprises also did not fare very well. In 1784, after his father's death, Blake and his former fellow apprentice James Parker opened a print shop. They began working with the radical publisher Joseph Johnson. Johnson's house was a meeting place for some leading English intellectual dissidents of that time. The storming of the Bastille in Paris in 1789 and the agonies of the French Revolution sent shockwaves through England. Some hoped for a corresponding outbreak of liberty in England, while others feared a breakdown of the social order. In much of his writing, Blake argues against the monarchy. In the French Revolution, Blake celebrates the rise of democracy in France and the fall of monarchy. Another product of the radical 1790s is The Marriage of Heaven and Hell. Written and edged between 1790 and 1793, Blake's poem brutally satirizes oppressive authority in church and state. The Proverbs of Hell, his other work, are clearly designed to shock the reader. It says that it is the oppressive nature of church and state, that has created the repulsive prisons and brothels. Sexual energy is not an inherent evil, but the repression of that energy is. The preachers of morality fail to understand that God is in all things, including the sexual nature of men and women, wrote William Blake. In August of 1790, Blake moved from his house to Poland Street across the Thames to the area known as Lambeth. The Blakes lived in the house for 10 years. At his home, Blake kept busy not only with his illuminated poetry, but also with the daily chore of making money. Because poetry, like today, was not exactly a money-making enterprise. During the 1790s, Blake earned fame as an engraver and was glad to receive numerous commissions. Between 1793 and 1795, Blake produced a remarkable collection of illuminated works that have come to be known as minor prophecies. Very little of Blake's poetry of the 1790s was known to the general public. His reputation as an artist was mixed. Response to his art ranged from praise to derision. But he did gain some fame as an engraver. In 1803, he returned to London. The family settled in a new residence on South Malton Street. His epic poem Jerusalem is in many ways Blake's major achievement. It is an epic poem consisting of 100 illuminated plates. In later life, Blake began to sell a great number of his works, particularly his Bible illustrations, to Thomas Butts, a patron who saw Blake more as a friend than a man whose work held artistic merit. This was typical of the opinions held of Blake throughout his life. On the day of his death, which happened on August 12, 1827, Blake worked relentlessly on his Dante series. Eventually, it is reported, he ceased working and turned to his wife, who was in tears by his bedside. There were just the two of them. There were some reports that his wife had a stillborn child, but they were not 100% proved to be real. And so, beholding her, Blake is said to have cried, "Stay, Kate, keep just as you are. I will draw your portrait, for you have ever been an angel to me." He truly loved her. Having completed this portrait now lost, Blake laid down his tools and began to sing hymns and verses. At 6 that evening, after promising his wife that he would be with her forever, Blake died. Gilchrist reports that a female lodger in the house present at his expiration said, "I have been at the death, not of a man, but of a blessed angel." George Richmond gives the following account of Blake's death in a letter to Samuel Palmer. He died in a most glorious manner. He said he was going to that country he had all his life wished to see, and expressed himself happy, hoping for salvation through Jesus Christ. Just before he died, his face became fair, his eyes brightened, and he burst out singing on the things he saw in heaven. Catherine paid for Blake's funeral with money lent to her by Linnell. Blake's body was buried in a plot shared with others 5 days after his death, on the eve of his 45th wedding anniversary, at Dissenters' burial ground in Bunhill Fields in the City of London area. His parents' bodies were buried in the same graveyard. Present at the ceremonies were Catherine Edward Calvert, George Richmond, Frederick Tatham, and John Linnell. Following Blake's death, Catherine moved into Tatham House as a housekeeper. She believed she was regularly visited by Blake's spirit. She continued selling his engravings and paintings, but entertained no business transaction without first consulting Mr. Blake. She claimed to have a connection to his spirit and communicating with his spirit. On the day of her death, in October 1831, she was as calm and cheerful as her husband, and called out to him as if he were only in the next room, to say she was coming to him, and it wouldn't be long now. So it's a beautiful love story of Blake and his wife, Catherine, 45-year love story. And so today we will read a couple of his poems. The first one is called To Divine Image. To mercy, pity, peace, and love, all pray in their distress, and to these virtues of delight return their thankfulness. For mercy, pity, peace, and love is God, our Father dear, and mercy, pity, peace, and love is man, his child, and care. For mercy, pity, peace, and love. For mercy has a human heart, pity a human face, and love the human form divine, and peace the human dress. Then every man of every clime that prays in his distress, prays to the human form divine, love, mercy, pity, peace. And all must love the human form, in heaven, Turk or Jew, where mercy, love, and pity dwell, their God is dwelling too. The Little Lamb. We'll read 3 of his poems. Little lamb, who made thee? Dost thou know who made thee? Gave thee life and bid thee feed by the stream over the mead? Gave thee clothing of delight? Softest clothing, woolly, bright, gave thee such a tender voice, making all the vales rejoice. Little lamb, who made thee? Dost thou know who made thee? Little lamb, I'll tell thee, little lamb, I'll tell thee, he is called by thy name, for he calls himself a lamb. He is meek and he is mild, he became a little child, and a child, and thou, I a child, and thou a lamb. We are called by his name, little lamb. God bless thee, little lamb, God bless thee. And the third little poem is called Poison Tree. I was angry with my friend. I told my wrath, my wrath did end. I was angry with my foe. I told it not, my wrath did grow. And I watered it in fears, night and morning. Night and morning with my tears, and I sunned it with smiles and with soft deceitful wiles, and it grew both day and night, till it bore an apple bright, and my foe beheld it shine, and he knew that it was mine, and into my garden stole, when the night had veiled the pole. In the morning glad I see my foe outstretched beneath the tree. So these are the 3 poems by William Blake. I hope you enjoyed listening to the life of William Blake and listening to his beautiful poetry. Please don't forget to like and to subscribe. Have a wonderful, wonderful day, weekend, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.